So the next state I want to talk about is one that I find that I like a lot. It's North Carolina because what they're doing down there is great. Because personally, as someone who is sort of against Wall Street and big banks, I'm always a big fan of credit unions and local banking. And what they're doing in North Carolina is actually really cool. Talk about it.
Yes, it is really cool. So in the late 80s and 90s, the police and other advocates for the immigrant communities were noticing that immigrants, especially immigrants who were undocumented, were being robbed at gunpoint. And the reason for that was because people knew that most likely people had a lot of cash on them. And they had a lot of cash on them because the banks, the big corporate banks, were not welcoming undocumented immigrants as customers,
Yeah.
right? And so very quickly, law enforcement realized, wow, it would be in everybody's interest if there were a way for people who were earning a wage to be able to put their money into in a safe place. And so the Latino Community Credit Union was created as a result of activists and the financial community and a broad alliance of people and nonprofit agencies. And it allows people with or without authorization to be in the country to a place to put their money and to also to learn about investments, to learn about unfair loans, and to provide loans that are fair and at reasonable rates. And it has become a kind of community center within not just the Latino community and not just the immigrant community, but for everybody. Anybody can go there and open an account and use their services. And it has allowed for small loans to be made to immigrant entrepreneurs who otherwise would not be able to get access to capital and would probably be working in low-wage jobs. And a study was done fairly recently that showed a very close association to the presence of the credit union and a reduction in crime. And there are several branches of this credit union that have opened up across the state of North Carolina. And it is a model program which, again, like the Utah program, many states and nonprofits are looking to emulate.
I want to talk about one more city here. So I live here in Boston. I've lived lots of places, but I'm actually originally from Omaha, Nebraska. And and what's going on in Omaha? I actually did not. I did. I just go back to visit. But when I read about the Omaha one, oh, that's really cool. Tell us what's happening in Nebraska.
Yeah, I love Omaha and I love Nebraska. I think it's just an absolutely fascinating place. Rapid immigration to Nebraska, both the city of Omaha.
Yeah.
And also to rural communities because of meatpacking jobs and other jobs that are available in Nebraska. So Nebraska has changed rapidly. But in Omaha, the increasing diversity of the city has always been pretty diverse, but the increasing diversity in part because of immigration led religious leaders there of the Episcopalian, Muslim, and Jewish communities to get together and create a model of fellowship and shared worship and shared space. And so they purchased an old country club, which had originally been a place where Jewish people who were excluded from other clubs, were allowed to join this country club. So it was a very symbolic place in the city of Omaha. And they have built a kind of compound, a worship compound, where there are 3 separate centers of worship for each faith. But there's also a 4th space where people can come together and they can learn about each other's faith and they can engage in social activities and get to know each other, where their children can attend play groups together. And it's just been a model of pluralism in the middle of the heartland, which is extremely inspiring. And the hope of the people who started it was that this too could be a kind of place that we could look to as an example of, both the challenges that are created when people from different faiths, different cultures, different backgrounds come together, and the misunderstandings that need to get corrected, but also the incredible the incredible opportunities that come as a result, and the relationships that can be built across these lines, and the good that can be done as a result. So yes, that's a really good story, and I'd love to see more things like that happen across the country.
And again, while we're talking, it's very positive to hear these stories, because like I was saying near the beginning of our interview, so whenever we hear about immigration, it really does seem to be very negative, and again, not to lessen the plight, because the plight is actually real. I guess my question here is, why do some of these mayors and smaller communities seem to get it, but national politicians don't get that? This seems to be the more humane and correct way for all communities to go forward, right? It seems obvious that this is the way you should be treating your fellow human being. What's the difference between these smaller places that get it and then the national front that seems to not understand that at all?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I think one of the reasons is that on the national level, our national policies are really basically, and this is a simplification, but are pretty much about the question of who gets to stay and who needs to go, right? That's what people are constantly debating back and forth. But the reality is that immigration is playing out at the local level. It's playing out in the places where people settle. And you're right. Everybody has a choice to make now. Either you can say, well, we don't want immigrants, so we want to get rid of them, which is completely unrealistic and, not to mention nasty and goes against American values. It just doesn't make sense for a community. Or you can say, okay, there are immigrants here. How can we draw on the assets? What can we do? How can we invest in immigrants so that they can be prosperous and full members of our community, engaged in the civic process, sending their kids to school, engaging there? And that type of thing has been shown time and time again. That's what contributes to the overall prosperity and well-being of a community, not alienating a group and having them off to the side and not prospering. And so I think what mayors began to see was that, yes, immigrants are potentially huge benefits for the overall community. And many places saw that was true and realized that when they began to invest in immigrants and work in collaboration with immigrants, that overall the economy improved, relationships improved, civic services improved, the ability to keep a community safe improved. All of those things benefited everybody. And I think the difference between the places, the thing I think that's common in all the stories that I wrote about was an understanding that we live in this country together. We are all part of a web of community. And what hurts one group will eventually come to hurt everybody.